are moments when the noise of the world recedes, and what remains is the sound of your own breath, echoing in the hollow chambers of your being. In that vast and sacred silence, you are no longer who you pretend to be, nor who others expect you to be. You are simply you, fragile, unfinished, mysterious, alone. But in that solitude, something ancient stirs, an archetype older than time itself, the wanderer, leaving the village behind, stepping into the wilderness not to escape life but to confront it at its core. This is not the loneliness of abandonment but the solitude of initiation, the first threshold on the path to individuation. For Carl Jung taught us, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And yet, who is that? Beneath the roles, the masks, the projections, who stands there waiting in the dark woods of your psyche? Solitude is not an absence, it is a presence, a field where the false dies, and the real is slowly, painfully born. In solitude, the world no longer mirrors your worth. There are no applauding hands, no comforting affirmations, only the naked confrontation with yourself. The ego, restless and afraid, begs for distractions, craves validation. But here, there is only stillness, and in that stillness the first glimpse of the shadow emerges. Ah, the shadow, the dark twin we spend a lifetime denying, repressing, fearing. Yet here, in the crucible of solitude, there is no one left to impress, no one to deceive. You see your envy, your rage, your longing for control. You see your wounds and the scars you pretend aren't there, and you understand. The shadow is not your enemy, it is your teacher, the one who holds the key to your wholeness. Psalm 139 whispers, "Where shall I go from your spirit? Or where shall I flee from your presence? Even in the depths, even in the darkness, you are seen." The divine gaze does not turn away from your shadow, it encompasses it, embraces it, and so must you. Solitude becomes the mirror where the unconscious reveals itself in symbols and dreams. The serpent winding through your sleep, the stranger knocking at your door, the river you dare not cross. All these are messages from within, veiled in archetypal forms, speaking a language the rational mind cannot decode. But the soul remembers. In this sacred aloneness, you learn that your pain is not meaningless. It is the signpost, pointing toward the places where your soul has been exiled, the parts of you banished into the unconscious, buried beneath years of social conditioning and personal compromise. You realize now, individuation is not the addition of something new but the return of what was lost. In the silence of solitude you hear it, the voice beneath the voice, the self calling you home. The self, that numinous center, that living presence that is both within you and beyond you. Jung called it the totality of the personality, but it is more than a concept. It is a force, a presence, a guiding star. It is what the psalmist meant when he said, "Be still and know that I am God," not an external deity watching from above, but the God image embedded in the core of your being, waiting, always waiting, for you to turn inward and recognize it. And so you walk deeper into solitude, not to isolate yourself, but to integrate yourself, to gather the scattered pieces of your soul like lost sheep, bringing them home to the center. This is the slow, arduous work of individuation. It is not glamorous. It will not make you famous. It may, in fact, estrange you from those who have not yet begun their own journey, but it will make you real, and being real is the only freedom. The desert fathers fled to the wilderness, not to escape sin, but to encounter it, to confront the inner demons that civilization kept at bay. They understood that solitude is a furnace that burns away illusion and forges the true self in the fires of authenticity. Likewise, in your solitude, you must face the twin temptations, despair and pride. Despair whispers, "You are alone because you are worthless." Pride shouts, "You are alone because you are superior." Both are lies. You are alone because you have been called, not by the world, but by the depths, by the self, by God. And the call is always the same. Leave the familiar and find yourself. Proverbs 20:5 says, "The purposes of a person's heart are deep waters, but one who has insight draws them out." In solitude you become that one who draws out the deep waters of your own heart. You lower the bucket into the dark well of the unconscious, and what you retrieve is both terrifying and holy. Sometimes it is rage you find there, a rage you were told as a child to suppress, to deny. But now in solitude you allow yourself to feel it, to honor it, to understand that beneath the rage is grief, and beneath the grief is love, a fierce, untamed love for life, for justice, for your own right to exist. Other times it is fear you find, that primal terror of rejection, abandonment, death. But in solitude, you do not run from the fear, you sit with it. You let it wash over you like a wave, and when it subsides you realize it did not destroy you, it purified you. And so, step by step, through tears and revelation, revelations, through dreams and awakenings, you begin to walk the path of individuation. It is not a path upward, but inward. It does not promise happiness, but meaning. It does not guarantee comfort, but authenticity. And in a world addicted to noise, to speed, to distraction, choosing solitude is the most radical act of all. It is the refusal to be defined by the expectations of others. It is the courage to sit in the silence until the truth of your being speaks. And when it does, it will not be in the voice of your parents, your culture, your religion, or your peers. It will be the voice that has been with you from the beginning, the voice that, as Psalm 139 says, knit you together in your mother's womb. That voice is the self, and the self has been waiting for you, here, in solitude, all along. But the path is not yet complete, for now that you have glimpsed the self, now that you have sat in the stillness and dared to listen, there arises a new task, the integration of what you have discovered. The ego, the fragile necessary construct that has carried you through life, trembles before the vastness of the self. It is like a candle flickering before the sun, unsure whether to resist or to surrender. And yet, surrender it must, not in annihilation, but in reverence. For the self does not seek to destroy the ego, but to reorder it, to dethrone it from its tyrannical position and place it where it belongs, as servant, not master. And here, solitude reveals its second power, not just as the space of revelation but as the crucible of integration. In solitude, you practice the art of holding opposites, your light and your darkness, your strength and your fragility, your longing for connection and your need for independence. This is what Jung called the transcendent function, the capacity to live in tension without collapsing into black and white thinking, without retreating into dogma or despair. You become capable of paradox, of complexity, of depth, and in that capacity, your soul begins to expand. You realize that the world is not divided into saints and sinners, winners and losers, heroes and villains, but that all these live within you as archetypes, as potentials. The warrior, the lover, the magician, the king, the orphan, the martyr, the trickster, the creator, all vying for your attention, for your allegiance. But in solitude, you do not choose sides. You listen to each. You learn their language, their gifts, their wounds. You invite them all to the table of your consciousness, and you become, at last, whole. This is the mystery spoken of in the Proverbs. The human spirit is the lamp of the Lord, searching every hidden part. Your spirit, illuminated by the divine spark, searches the hidden parts of your psyche, not to judge them, not to banish them, but to welcome them home. And in that homecoming you experience a kind of sacred loneliness, a solitude not of isolation, but of singularity. For no one can walk this path for you. No one can individuate in your place. It is, as Jung said, a process of the utmost personal significance. And yet, you are not alone. For as you walk deeper into yourself, you find that you are walking deeper into the collective, into the archetypal ground shared by all humanity. Your dreams echo the myths told for millennia. Your struggles mirror those of every seeker who has ever dared to confront the self. The cross, the labyrinth, the mountain. These are not just symbols, they are maps of the soul's journey. And in solitude, you begin to see them not as external myths, but as inner realities, structures etched into the very fabric of your being. And so the cross becomes your willingness to bear the weight of your own existence, to embrace the suffering that individuation demands, without fleeing, without blaming. The labyrinth becomes your recognition that the path is not linear but winding, that every step forward may be followed by a step back, that confusion is not failure, but necessary. And the mountain becomes the goal not of conquest but of vision, the place where, having endured the climb, you glimpse, however briefly, the totality of your life, the interconnectedness of all things, the presence of God in all. As the psalmist wrote, I lift up my eyes to the mountains. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. In solitude, you lift up your eyes, not to escape the world, but to see it rightly, clearly, truly, and, having seen, you return. For this is the final paradox of solitude, that it is both departure and return. You left the world to find yourself, and in finding yourself, you are able at last to truly return to the world, not as a mask, not as a role, but as a whole individuated being. You return not with superiority but with humility, not with certainties but with wisdom, not to conform but to serve. For the individuated soul does not stand above others. It kneels among them, knowing that the same self that dwells within you dwells within all, and so you return, carrying the flame of your own authenticity, knowing that you will never again lose yourself in the crowd, never again betray your essence for the approval of the many, never again silence the voice that solitude taught you to hear. And yet you know also that the path does not end, for individuation is not a destination but a way of being, a commitment to inner truth, to continual integration, to perpetual becoming. There will be more descents into solitude, more confrontations with the shadow, more revelations of the self, more deaths, more resurrections, and each time you will emerge changed, more real, more whole, more alive. For this is the gift and the burden of solitude on the path to individuation, that it strips you bare and clothes you in authenticity, that it wounds you and heals you, that it isolates you and reconnects you, that it destroys the false self and gives birth to the true. And so, in this moment, as you stand at the threshold of your own inner wilderness, ask yourself, are you willing to be alone so that you might at last be whole? Are you willing to let go of who you thought you were, to become who you truly are? For in the end, solitude is not a punishment. It is a calling, a sacred invitation, whispered from the depths of your being. Come, come, and be transformed. And when you answer that call, you cross an invisible threshold that few dare to approach. For the way of solitude is not celebrated in this world. It is feared. The world praises conformity, rewards adaptation, and demands allegiance to its rhythms. But the one who enters solitude steps out of time as the world knows it, and enters into the eternal now. Here, in the silence of your own presence, you begin to perceive time differently, no longer fragmented into schedules and deadlines, but flowing as a single river, carrying you beyond the superficial concerns of daily life, into the depths where your soul has always dwelled. You realize now that most of your life has been spent at the surface, skimming over the deep waters of your own being, afraid to dive. But solitude does not allow you to remain at the surface. It demands that you submerge, that you descend into the underworld of your psyche, into the place the ancients called Hades, the place Jung called the unconscious. And though you are afraid of what you might find, afraid of what you might lose, you go, because something within you knows that all true transformation requires descent, that the seed must fall into the earth and die before it can rise, that resurrection is impossible without crucifixion. You begin to see that solitude is the tomb and the womb, the place where your false self dies, and your true self is born, and in that dark place, you meet the figures of your unconscious, not as distant concepts but as living presences. The anima or animus, the soul image that has shaped your relationships, your desires, your longings, now steps forward, no longer projected onto others, but seen for what it truly is, a guide, a bridge between the ego and the self. You confront your complexes, the emotional knots woven from childhood wounds, ancestral traumas, cultural imprints. You feel their pull, their power, but now in solitude you have the space to observe them without being consumed. You learn to disentangle, to release, to forgive, and with every knot undone, with every projection withdrawn, you feel yourself, becoming lighter and freer, more yourself. The words of Christ echo in your solitude. You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. But you now understand that this freedom is not given. It is won through courage, through patience, through the willingness to endure the loneliness that always accompanies inner work. For solitude does not immediately bring peace. At first, it brings chaos. The mind rebels, the heart aches, the body longs for the comforts of the familiar. You may feel lost, disoriented, as if everything you knew about yourself is slipping away. But this is necessary. The old structures must crumble for the new to arise. As Jung wrote, there is no coming to consciousness without pain, and so you endure the pain, not masochistically, but purposefully, knowing that each moment of discomfort is breaking open a space within you, a space that was once filled with illusion, and now can be filled with truth. And as you sit in that space, breathing, weeping, reflecting, something shifts. You feel the presence of the self, not as a distant goal, but as an intimate reality, a quiet, steady center within you that was always there, unnoticed, unacknowledged, waiting. You realize that all your striving, all your seeking, was not to create the self, but to uncover it. Like the treasure buried in the field, like the pearl of great price, it was hidden in the depths of your being, beneath the layers of persona, beneath the masks and defenses. And now, in solitude, you have found it, not through effort, but through surrender. And in that moment you experience what the mystics have always described, a peace that surpasses understanding, a joy that is not dependent on circumstances, a love that is unconditional, unwavering, whole. You understand now why solitude is essential to individuation, because only in solitude can you encounter yourself without distortion. Only in solitude can you hear the voice of the self above the clamor of the world. Only in solitude can you be reborn. And yet, even now, the journey is not over. For solitude is not a destination, but a practice, a rhythm, a return. There will be times when you must go back into the world, into relationships, into work, into the chaos of daily life. And there will be times when you must retreat again into solitude, to reconnect with your center, to recalibrate your soul. This is the dance of individuation, the oscillation between engagement and withdrawal, between communion and solitude, between the world and the self. And as you learn this dance, you realize that you are no longer afraid of solitude. It is no longer a place of exile, but a place of homecoming. You understand what the psalmist meant when he said, "He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul." For solitude is the still water, the place where your soul is restored, where your fragmented self is gathered, where your wounds are tended, where your purpose is clarified. And so you come to cherish solitude, not as an escape from life, but as the ground from which life can be truly lived. For now you know who you are, not as a role, not as a title, not as a reflection in another's eyes, but as a soul, a self, a being created in the image of God, called to embody that image uniquely, authentically, fully. And with that knowing comes a responsibility, the responsibility to live in alignment with your truth, to speak your voice, even when it trembles, to walk your path, even when it is lonely, to follow the call of your soul, even when it leads you away from the crowd. For the individuated life is not the easy life, but it is the meaningful life, and in the end, meaning is all that endures. As the book of Ecclesiastes reminds us, all is vanity, except this, that a person should stand in awe of God and keep his ways. And you now understand that to stand in awe of God is to stand in awe of the self, of the mystery and majesty of your own being, of the sacredness of your solitude, and of the courage it takes to walk this path. And so, you walk on, not because you must, but because you are called, not because you know the way, but because you trust the process, not because you seek perfection, but because you seek wholeness. And in that seeking, you find yourself, at last, and now, as you stand at the farthest edge of what you once knew, looking back across the terrain you have crossed, you understand something that could never have been taught to you, only lived, that solitude is not a place, but a condition of the soul. It is not dependent on being physically alone, nor is it a withdrawal from the responsibilities and loves of life. It is a way of being, an orientation of consciousness, a return, again and again, to that inner sanctuary where your self resides, untouched by the opinions, the noise, the judgments of the world. You realize that even in the midst of the most crowded city, in the middle of a conversation, or surrounded by those you love, you can remain rooted in that solitude, for it has become your ground, your compass, your home. And you see now with a clarity that only solitude can grant, that all the moments of loss, all the nights of loneliness, all the tears shed in silence, were not punishments, but preparations for this, the unveiling of your authentic being. The pain of solitude was the labor, and now you emerge, not perfect, but whole, not without wounds, but with those wounds transformed into wisdom. Your scars now shine with the quiet dignity of one who has suffered consciously, who has chosen the path of individuation, knowing full well the cost, and embracing it nonetheless. And the world, the world may never understand your journey. It may continue to call you back to its distractions, its comforts, its illusions, but you no longer belong to it in the same way. You are in the world, but not of it, for you have drunk from the deeper well. You have sat with the darkness and found that it was not a void, but a womb. You have confronted your shadow and realized it was your lost brother, your hidden sister waiting to be reconciled. You have heard the voice of the self not as a distant theology, but as an immediate and undeniable presence, whispering, calling, guiding, and now you know what it means to live in alignment, not as a moral code imposed from without, but as a natural expression of your innermost being. You begin to see that the path of individuation is the path of love, not sentimental love, but fierce, radical, unconditional love, for the world, for others, for the broken and beautiful totality of existence. You understand what the ancient words meant. Love your neighbor as yourself, because now, at last, you know yourself, and knowing yourself, you no longer project your unlived life onto others. You no longer seek in them what you have denied in yourself. You no longer make them carry the burden of your disowned shadow. Instead, you meet them as they are and as you are, human, finite, sacred. And in that meeting, true relationship becomes possible, not one based on dependency or fear or the hunger to be completed, but one born from the overflow of your own wholeness. For the individuated person does not need others to complete them, but chooses to be with others in the freedom of love. And so you live, not from compulsion, but from choice, not from fear, but from trust, not from scarcity, but from abundance. This is the gift of solitude, not the absence of others, but the presence of yourself, not escape, but engagement, not isolation, but integration. And from this place you step into the world with a new kind of power, not the power to dominate, but the power to serve, to create, to heal, to inspire. You become, as Jung said, a light to yourself, and in doing so, a light to others. And when others ask you, how did you find such peace, such clarity, such strength, you will smile softly and perhaps say nothing, for how can you explain that all of it began the moment you dared to be alone, that all of it was born in the silence where you met yourself, that all of it grew through the long dark nights when you thought you were lost, but were in fact being found, and perhaps you will simply invite them, with your presence, with your life, to take the same journey, to risk solitude, to embrace the wilderness, to descend into the depths, to face their shadow, to encounter their self, to walk the path of individuation, not because it is easy, but because it is the only path that leads to wholeness, to authenticity, to life. And so, you walk on, not alone, but all one, at peace with yourself, at home in the world, at one with the mystery, for this is the power of solitude, on the path to individuation, and now, the path is yours. Walk it with courage, walk it with humility, walk it with love, and never forget, the self is always there, waiting, in the silence, in the stillness, in the solitude, where the journey began, and where it always begins again.